In the beginning, after God created the heavens and the earth, after the Garden of Eden and the fall of man, our story begins with the first children ever born. These are tales as old as humanity itself, stories of brothers and betrayal, of dreams and destinies, of faith tested and redemption found. Today we'll journey through some of the most profound narratives ever told, stories that have shaped our understanding of human nature for thousands of years. From the fields where Cain and Abel made their offerings, to the majestic courts of Egypt, where Joseph stood before Pharaoh, each story reveals something deep and true about who we are. We'll witness humanity's first murder and the flood that cleansed the earth. We'll follow Abraham as he leaves everything behind to follow a divine calling, watch Jacob wrestle with both man and God, and see how Joseph's journey from slave to ruler shows us that even in our darkest moments, hope prevails. These aren't just ancient tales. They're mirrors that reflect our own struggles, our own choices, our own potential for both tragedy and triumph. In every jealous rage of Cain, every test of Abraham's faith, every dream of Joseph, we see echoes of our own lives, our own families, our own hearts. Join me as we walk through these foundational stories from the book of Genesis, where every character, every choice, every consequence still speaks to us today. These are more than just stories. They're the very roots of our understanding of faith, family, and what it means to be human. Let us begin where it all started, with two brothers, two offerings, and one choice that would change everything. After leaving the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve began their new life in the harsh world beyond. Soon, Eve gave birth to their first son, Cain. As she held him in her arms, she declared with joy, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." Not long after, she bore another son and named him Abel. The brothers grew into very different men. Cain, the firstborn, found his calling in the soil. With strong hands and a determined spirit, he worked the earth, coaxing life from the ground that God had cursed. His fields stretched out under the sun, golden grain swaying in the breeze. Every seed he planted, every crop he harvested, was a triumph over the thorns and thistles that fought against him. Abel, the younger brother, chose a different path. He became a keeper of sheep, leading his flocks through green pastures and beside still waters. His gentle hands tended the lambs, and his watchful eyes protected them from harm. Each dawn found him guiding his sheep to fresh grazing grounds, his life moving to the rhythm of the seasons. One day, both brothers felt moved to bring offerings to the Lord. Cain gathered the fruits of his labor, grain and produce from his fields. His hands, still bearing the soil of his work, arranged his offering before God. Abel also brought his gift, the firstborn of his flock, carefully chosen, the finest of what he had. The Lord looked upon Abel and his offering with favor. The smoke from Abel's sacrifice rose straight to heaven, a sweet aroma to the Lord. But when Cain presented his offering, God's favor was withheld. The smoke from his grain offering clung low to the ground, and Cain's heart grew heavy with rejection. Seeing Cain's darkening expression, God spoke to him. "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." The seed of jealousy had already taken root in Cain's heart. One day, he spoke to Abel, "Let us go out to the field." His words seemed innocent, but his intentions were dark. There, in the field, where Cain had toiled, where the ground had yielded to his plow, he turned against his brother. In a moment of rage, he struck Abel down, and the earth that had received his offerings now received his brother's blood. The Lord's voice cut through the silence. "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," Cain replied defiantly. "Am I my brother's keeper?" But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain's despair was immediate. "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But even in judgment, God showed mercy. He placed a mark on Cain, protecting him from those who would seek vengeance. Then Cain went out from the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The first murderer became the first exile, carrying with him the weight of his choices and the mark of both his sin and God's mercy. And so ended the story of the first brothers, a tale that would echo through time, speaking to all generations about the consequences of jealousy, the weight of choice, and the complex interplay of justice and mercy in God's dealings with humanity. As generations passed after Cain's exile, humanity multiplied across the face of the earth. But with each passing year, darkness grew in the hearts of men. Violence filled the streets, corruption poisoned every thought, and the world God had created became unrecognizable. Every inclination of human thought was bent toward evil, and the earth was filled with darkness. But among all the people of that age lived one man who walked differently. Noah found favor in God's eyes. In a world where everyone chose their own path, Noah chose to walk with God. His life stood as a lighthouse in a storm of wickedness, righteous, blameless, among the people of his time. God looked upon the earth he had made and saw how his creation had turned to violence and destruction. With heavy heart, he spoke to Noah, "I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. But you, Noah, will be saved. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood." God gave Noah precise instructions: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, 3 decks, a roof, and a door in its side. As Noah's hammer struck the first nail, his neighbors must have thought him mad. Year after year, in a world that had never seen rain, Noah built. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, worked alongside him, while his words of warning fell on deaf ears. Then came the day when God's command rang out, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family." The sky darkened as animals began to arrive. 2 by 2 they came, male and female, each according to its kind. Clean animals by sevens, unclean by pairs. They came as if drawn by an unseen hand, great beasts and tiny creatures, birds of every feather, all finding their way to the ark Noah had built. Once they were inside, God himself closed the door. For 7 days nothing happened. Then, the heavens opened. Rain fell as it had never fallen before. The springs of the great deep burst forth. For 40 days and 40 nights, water poured from above and surged from below. The waters rose and rose until they covered the highest mountains under the heavens. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all mankind. Only Noah remained alive, and those with him in the ark. For 150 days, water covered the earth. Then God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock with him in the ark. He sent a wind over the earth, and the waters began to recede. Slowly, day by day, the waters lowered. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The ark was removed from the temple and back into the ark, and there it sits. It's the greatest monument of the Jewish culture. Noah sent out a raven, then a dove. When the dove returned with a fresh olive leaf, Noah knew the waters had receded. When it didn't return at all, he knew it was time. God's voice came again. "Come out of the ark." Stepping onto dry ground, Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices to the Lord. The sweet aroma rose to heaven, and God made a promise. "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done." God set his rainbow in the clouds, a sign of his covenant with every living creature on earth. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, he said, "I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind." But the story didn't end there. Noah, the man who had saved humanity, planted a vineyard. One day he drank of its wine and became drunk, lying uncovered in his tent. Ham, his youngest son, saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, walked backward, and covered their father's shame. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he blessed Shem and Japheth, but cursed Ham's son Canaan. As humanity began anew, they gathered in the plain of Shinar with grand ambitions. "Come," they said, "let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." Their pride echoed the sin that had caused the flood, and God confused their languages, scattering them across the earth. The tower was left unfinished, a monument to human pride, and the place was called Babel. Thus ended the great cleansing of the earth, a story of judgment and mercy, of ending and beginning, of human failure and divine faithfulness. Through the waters of the flood, God had given humanity a fresh start. But the human heart remained unchanged. Yet his rainbow still stretches across the sky after the rain, reminding us of his promise, his mercy, and his faithfulness that endures through all generations. In the great city of Ur, where ziggurats reached toward heaven and merchants filled the streets with the sounds of commerce, lived a man named Abram. Though he was surrounded by the worship of many gods, Abram's heart was touched by the one true God, who spoke to him with a command that would change history. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household. Go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. Through you all peoples on earth will be blessed." Abram, 75 years old, took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions and servants. They set out for a land they had never seen, following the promise of God. Through the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia they traveled, leaving behind everything familiar, driven forward by faith alone. When they reached Canaan, God appeared to Abram again. "To your offspring I will give this land." There, among the great trees of Moreh, Abram built an altar to the Lord. But his faith would soon be tested. Famine struck the land, harsh and unrelenting. Abram journeyed south to Egypt, where the Nile's waters promised life, but fear gripped his heart. Sarai's beauty, even in her advancing years, could mean his death. "Say you are my sister," he told her, "so that I will be treated well for your sake." Indeed, Pharaoh's officials saw Sarai and took her to Pharaoh's palace, but God protected her, afflicting Pharaoh's household with serious diseases until the truth was revealed. Pharaoh returned Sarai to Abram and sent them away with great wealth. Returning to Canaan, Abram and Lot's possessions had grown so great that the land could not support them both. "Let there be no quarreling between us," Abram said to Lot. "If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left." Lot chose the fertile plain of Jordan, leaving Abram the seemingly lesser portion. But after Lot had gone, God spoke again. "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth." One dark night, God made a covenant with Abram. In a deep sleep, Abram saw a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch pass between pieces of sacrificed animals, God himself sealing his promise. But years passed, and still Abram and Sarai remained childless. Following Sarai's suggestion, Abram took her servant Hagar as a second wife. She bore him Ishmael. But this was not God's planned heir. When Abram was 99 years old, God appeared again, changing his name to Abraham and Sarai's to Sarah, promising them a son of their own. Sarah laughed at the promise. She was 90 years old. But the following year, Isaac was born, the son of promise, the seemingly impossible made real by God's faithfulness. Then came Abraham's greatest test. God's voice came in the night. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering." With a heavy heart but unwavering faith, Abraham took Isaac to Mount Moriah. As they climbed, Isaac asked innocently, "Father, where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" "God himself will provide the lamb, my son," Abraham replied, his voice steady despite his breaking heart. The altar was built, the wood was arranged, Isaac was bound. Abraham raised the knife, his heart torn between love for his son and obedience to God. Then, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket. God had indeed provided the sacrifice, just as Abraham had told Isaac. There, on the mountain, Abraham experienced both the ultimate test of faith and the ultimate provision of God. Thus Abraham, who had left his home with nothing but a promise, became the father of faith. His journey from Ur to the mountain of sacrifice showed that faith is not just believing, but acting on that belief. Through him, God began to build a nation that would bless all peoples on earth, a promise that continues to unfold to this day. After Sarah's death, Abraham grew concerned about finding a wife for Isaac. He called his most trusted servant and made him swear an oath. "Go to my homeland and find a wife for my son. Do not take a wife from among the Canaanites." The servant journeyed to the city of Nahor, carrying 10 camels loaded with gifts. At evening, when women came to draw water, he prayed, "O Lord, let the young woman who offers water to me and my camels be the one you have chosen." Before he finished praying, a beautiful young woman named Rebekah came to the well. When she not only offered him water, but volunteered to water his camels, all 10 of them, the servant knew his prayer was answered. Rebekah was the granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor. Rebekah agreed to return with the servant. As she approached her new home, she saw Isaac meditating in the fields. Isaac took Rebekah as his wife and loved her, finding comfort after his mother's death. But like Sarah before her, Rebekah was barren. Isaac prayed fervently to the Lord, and after 20 years, Rebekah conceived. But the pregnancy was difficult, and the babies struggled within her. When she inquired of the Lord, he told her, "2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." The first emerged red and hairy, and they named him Esau. His brother came out, grasping Esau's heel, and they called him Jacob. As the boys grew, their differences became clear. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, and Isaac's favorite for the wild game he brought home. Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents, and Rebekah's beloved. One day, Jacob was cooking stew when Esau came in from hunting, famished. The aroma of the red lentil stew filled the air. "Feed me some of that red stew, for I am exhausted," Esau demanded. Jacob, ever the opportunist, replied, "First sell me your birthright." "Look, I am about to die," Esau said dramatically. "What good is a birthright to me?" So Esau swore away his birthright for a bowl of stew, despising his sacred inheritance for a moment's satisfaction. Years later, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, he called Esau, "Hunt game for me and prepare the food I love. Then I will give you my blessing before I die." But Rebekah overheard. While Esau was hunting, she prepared goat meat the way Isaac loved. She covered Jacob's hands and neck with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairiness. Jacob, wearing Esau's clothes, brought the food to his father. "Who are you, my son?" Isaac asked, suspicious. "I am Esau, your firstborn," Jacob lied. Isaac felt Jacob's goat-skin-covered hands. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Still uncertain, he blessed Jacob with the covenant blessing. "May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you." Shortly after, Esau returned with his game prepared. The deception was discovered, and Esau's anguished cry shook the tent. "Bless me, me also, my father." But it was too late. The blessing was given, and Isaac trembled violently when he realized what had happened. Esau's blessing would be of the earth, and he would serve his brother until he could throw off his yoke. Esau's heart burned with hatred. "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother, Jacob." When Rebekah heard of Esau's plans, she arranged for Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran. "Stay there until your brother's fury subsides," she told him, not knowing it would be 20 years before she would see her beloved son again. Isaac lived to see Jacob return many years later, having become the father of 12 sons who would become the 12 tribes of Israel. But the cost of deception was high. Rebekah never saw her favorite son again, and the brothers' reconciliation would come only after years of separation and struggle. Thus the promise passed to Jacob through deception and strife, showing how God's purposes can be accomplished even through human failings. The quiet deceiver would become Israel, the one who struggles with God, but not before learning hard lessons about the consequences of deception. Fleeing from his brother's wrath, Jacob traveled alone toward Haran. As the sun set on his first night of exile, he found a place to rest, using a stone as his pillow. In his dreams that night, he saw something remarkable: a stairway resting on earth, reaching to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. Above it stood the Lord, who said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. They will be like the dust of the earth, and through you all peoples on earth will be blessed. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go." Jacob awoke and trembled. "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." He set up his stone pillow as a pillar, poured oil on it, and named the place Bethel, House of God. Arriving at his uncle Laban's home, Jacob soon fell deeply in love with Rachel, Laban's younger daughter. "I'll work 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage," he offered. Those 7 years seemed like days because of his love for her. But on the wedding night, Laban deceived the deceiver. In the darkness, he sent his older daughter Leah to Jacob instead of Rachel. When morning came and Jacob discovered the switch, His cry of dismay echoed his brothers. "Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied smoothly, "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter before the firstborn." He offered Rachel, too, for another 7 years of work. Jacob agreed, and so began a complex household marked by rivalry and competition. Leah bore sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, barren like her mother-in-law before her, gave Jacob her maidservant Bilhah, who bore Dan and Naphtali. Leah did the same with her maidservant Zilpah, who bore Gad and Asher. Then Leah bore Issachar and Zebulun. Finally, Rachel's prayers were answered with Joseph. After 20 years, Jacob heard God's call to return home. He left secretly with his family and flocks, but Laban pursued them. After a tense confrontation and covenant-making, they parted ways. But a greater challenge lay ahead, facing Esau. The night before meeting his brother, Jacob sent his families across the Jabbok River while he remained alone. In the darkness, a man wrestled with him until daybreak. As dawn approached, the man touched Jacob's hip, wrenching it from its socket. But Jacob wouldn't let go. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man said, "but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Limping but transformed, Jacob looked up to see Esau approaching with 400 men. He bowed 7 times as he approached his brother, but Esau ran to meet Jacob, embraced him, and wept. The brothers were reconciled at last. But peace would not last. In Shechem, Jacob's daughter Dinah was defiled by the prince of the land. Her brothers Simeon and Levi took violent revenge, slaughtering all the men of the city, bringing shame and danger to the family. Then came the deepest sorrow. Rachel, his beloved, died giving birth to Benjamin on the road to Ephrath. Jacob set up a pillar at her grave, which stands to this day. The woman he had worked 14 years to marry was gone, leaving him with their 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And Jacob's story was one of transformation, from a deceiver to wrestled with God, from a man running from his past to a man blessed by God despite his flaws. Through him, God built the 12 tribes of Israel, each son becoming a patriarch in his own right. The promises made to Abraham were being fulfilled even through the twists and turns of human choices and their consequences. Of all his sons, Jacob loved Joseph the most, gifting him with a richly ornamented coat of many colors. Joseph, 17 and favored, did little to hide his status. He brought his father bad reports about his brothers, and then came the dreams. "Listen to this dream," he told his brothers. "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to mine." His brothers sneered, "Do you intend to reign over us?" Then came another dream. The sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Even his father rebuked him. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers tending flocks near Shechem. Seeing him approaching in his colorful coat, they plotted. "Whoa, here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into a pit. We'll see what becomes of his dreams then." But Reuben, the eldest, suggested they throw him into a pit instead, secretly planning to rescue him later. They stripped Joseph of his special coat and threw him into the empty cistern. Then, seeing a caravan of Ishmaelite traders, Judah proposed, "What profit is there in killing our brother? Let's sell him instead." silver, 20 pieces of silver. That was the price they got for their brother. They dipped his beloved coat in goat's blood and brought it to their father. Jacob's grief was inconsolable. I will go down to the grave mourning for my son. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, rising to manage Potiphar's entire household. But Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon him, and when he refused her advances, she accused him falsely. Joseph was thrown into prison. Even in prison, Joseph's gift for administration and his ability to interpret dreams marked him. He interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. One would be restored, the other executed. "Remember me when it goes well with you," Joseph asked the cupbearer, but he was forgotten. 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed of 7 fat cows devoured by 7 lean ones, and 7 healthy heads of grain swallowed by 7 withered heads. When no one could interpret these dreams, the cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. Brought before Pharaoh, Joseph declared, "God is giving Pharaoh warning. 7 years of abundance are coming, followed by 7 years of severe famine." Then Joseph suggested, "Let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to manage the land through these times." Pharaoh replied, "Since God has made all this known to you, no one is as discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders." Joseph was 30 years old when he entered Pharaoh's service. During the 7 plentiful years, he stored up massive quantities of grain. When the famine struck, Egypt alone was prepared. People from all lands came to Egypt to buy grain. Among them came 10 brothers, bowing low before the Egyptian viceroy, just as Joseph had dreamed. They didn't recognize their brother in his Egyptian garb, but he recognized them. Joseph tested them, accusing them of being spies, demanding they bring their youngest brother Benjamin, holding Simeon hostage. When they returned with Benjamin, Joseph tested them again, planting his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. When the cup was discovered, Judah, who had suggested selling Joseph, now offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. Seeing this transformation in his brothers, Joseph could contain himself no longer. He sent everyone else out and wept so loudly the Egyptians heard him, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers were terrified, but Joseph said, "Don't be afraid. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Jacob's family moved to Egypt, 70 persons in all. When Jacob saw Joseph, he embraced him and said, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." And so the family of Israel came to Egypt, where they would grow from a family into a nation. Through Joseph's suffering and exaltation, God had preserved the line of Abraham, showing how he works through human actions, both good and evil, to fulfill his promises. From the first brothers who brought their offerings before God, to a family reunited in the courts of Egypt, we have walked through generations of faith, failure, and divine faithfulness. These stories echo through time, speaking to us even today. We've seen how a single choice, Cain's anger, Noah's obedience, Abraham's faith, Jacob's deception, Joseph's forgiveness, can ripple through generations. In each story, we witness the dance between human free will and divine purpose. Through Cain and Abel, we learn that God sees not just our offerings, but our hearts. In Noah, we discovered that one righteous person can preserve hope for all humanity. Abraham showed us that faith means stepping into the unknown, trusting God's promises, even when they seem impossible. Isaac's story revealed how family patterns repeat, the same deceptions, the same struggles, yet God's purposes prevail. In Jacob, we witnessed how God can transform a deceiver into a patriarch, a runner into a wrestler who prevails with God. And through Joseph, we saw how God can turn the deepest betrayal into the greatest salvation. These aren't just ancient tales frozen in time. They're our story too. Every sibling rivalry, every parent's favoritism, every dream crushed and reborn, every reconciliation that seemed impossible until it happened. They remind us that God works not despite our humanity, but through it, weaving our choices, both good and bad, into His greater purpose. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Torah, following the children of Israel as they grow from a family into a nation. We'll witness their suffering in Egypt, their dramatic exodus under Moses' leadership, and their journey to become God's covenant people at Mount Sinai. The story continues, and like Abraham's descendants, we too are part of this grand narrative. A story of faith, failure, and the God who never abandons His promises.